saw 3 movies this week. It was initially just going to be 2, but then I figured I might as well go ahead and witness Tyler Perry putting Madea out of our misery. But obviously we're going to start with the big movie of the week, which is Captain Marvel. Once again, I know people are really trying to build up the whole superhero fatigue thing, but I just still kind of find it really exciting how we have these Marvel movies where every time they come around it feels like some giant event is happening, especially with the events of Infinity War having already taken place up to this point. I know news just broke recently where it was like, they said after the next Spider-Man there's going to be like a break. But a break is like still less than a year. And honestly, I don't even really care. I know a lot of people, like I said, seem to be getting worn down, but I am perfectly fine with this for the most part. And after Captain Marvel, that opinion really hasn't changed at all. Obviously, this has a lot to live up to because of the post-credit scene in Infinity War that builds up. This is basically going to be the character that has to save the day after everything that happened. Obviously, you know, we still have Captain America and Black Widow and Hulk and all them, and War Machine, but obviously there's a lot of build up to this character, and her power in particular, and her connection with Fury, so... and obviously going in, this was all going to be new to me because I have like no familiarity with this character whatsoever. I know the only really things I've heard about this character were way back in the day when everybody was kind of pushing for Blunt to be cast. But apart from that, I just knew nothing about this whatsoever. Like, I heard that there was a lot of excitement, that like the Skrulls were going to be in it and all that, but I had no idea what that meant or who they were prior to the movie. So the only thing I was aware of that I did find particularly exciting was the Guardians connections. Were surprising to me. Like, I had no idea about that whatsoever until the poster with the cast list on it came out, and I saw Jaimin and Lee Pace in there. It's kind of misleading how high they are in the credits, and the fact that their names are on the poster at all. But still, and it's present though throughout the entire movie, and that's the thing where you may have to forgive me because if you've seen my Marvel movie reviews prior to this, I've said this a bunch of times, but it bears repeating in this case especially. Prior to Infinity War, Infinity War pretty much makes this a moot point now, but I always thought that there was kind of a distance for a while there between the Guardians movies and the rest of the Marvel Universe. And I sort of like how the more connections Guardians has to the other movies, the better, because the more complete the universe feels. But yeah, obviously with Infinity War, Guardians is absolutely, like, everything's fully in line now, but there was a time there when the first Guardians came out, and somewhat with the second one, where they still felt a bit distant from everything else, but now it's just all come together nicely, so it's really, it's kind of especially nice after Infinity War to see that it's all continuing now, even if it does sort of kind of feel like a big spoiler in itself, because it's like, obviously, in, you know, true fashion of a lot of these movies, there's going to be a bit of a surprise when some villains are revealed later, and it's like, well, if you see characters at the beginning basically hanging around and interacting closely with people that we know to be villains in previous movies, they too are probably villains. No matter what they look like on the surface. The intention may be that we know that, like, immediately because of that, but, like, when, you know, certain reveals happen later, the score and the way the reveals happen seem to think they're surprising us, I guess, but, yeah. So, I was actually concerned about this movie at the start, and kind of for a while, because you'll notice, especially this late in the series, even if it's a character we're meeting for the first time, this late in the series, it feels a bit dooming at first if what's happening at the very start is not like instantly gripping. Because I know that's in any other movie that might seem like a lot to ask to, like, you know, not even bother with setup or anything like that, just go right into something that just immediately grabs the audience. Because even with, like, most recently, I guess, as far as the movies go, where we're meeting the character for the first time in their own movie, would be Doctor Strange. But, like, even in that case, we opened with the Tilda Swinton scene that just got really, really crazy really fast and immediately, you know, got your attention in this really big way. This movie doesn't really do that. It's her and Jude Law having a Neo Morpheus fight, and then a lot of exposition and a lot of jumping around that is incredibly confusing. Once again, I didn't know if it was because I wasn't familiar with this particular character and material, or if it was just the way the movie was made. I don't know, but I still kind of don't hold that against it too much, considering that it will all make sense by the end of the movie. But I mean, that first 20 minutes or half an hour or so was, like, really kind of hard to get into, but once it found its footing, especially when she, you know, gets to 1994, then I think that also might be what was throwing me off, was I wasn't quite sure, like, where she... Because the only thing I knew going in was the 1994 thing, so I wasn't aware of, like, where she came from and the whole, you know, Jude Law storyline and all that stuff. So it was a little jarring that it took some time to get to that point. But once we got there, though, and she met up with Fury, it did really take off, especially with... Well, I guess it was a little concerning at first, where you might think they lean on the 1994 thing a little too much, like all those movies that are set in the 80s, and so they just bombard you with 80s songs and say, here's all these things for the era. You can see the Radio Shack joke coming from a mile away when it happens. It does hurt a little bit that they use a blockbuster to show just how far back in time she is. But nevertheless... and eventually we introduce Fury and Coulson again, only obviously much younger. I like the fact that they actually, like, I think I heard Jackson say they specifically modeled his 90s look after the way he looked in The Negotiator. Like, that was their actual point of reference. And then, obviously, Coulson looking a bit younger also. And while Coulson is a bit odd looking, Jackson looks incredible, to the point that after a while you kind of stop thinking about the fact that he's de-aged by CGI. I know for some reason a lot of people, like, well, no, I wouldn't say a lot of people, but there's those people out there that are like, either they're just looking for something to bitch about or what, but I don't really understand the people that are like, have been incredibly critical of the whole de-aging thing, saying it looks weird, because it's really, like, really stellar effects doing that. Like going back to, you know, what they did, doing it with Downey in Civil War, and Kurt Russell and Guardians 2, and Michael Douglas and Ant-Man. We knew what all these people looked like at the ages they're supposed to be in those moments, and that's what they look like. You can, it's really impressive. So, that's something that, like I said, never bothered me. Though, if somebody were to say that Coulson looks a little odd, like, I wouldn't fight them or anything. But Jackson in particular does look like he stepped right out of the era that he is coming from in the movie, also. So. As far as Brie Larson goes, I do tend to like Brie Larson for the most part. I liked Room a lot, obviously, and I still think Free Fire needs to be seen by a lot more people. She was one of those cases, though, where it was like, when she was cast, it wasn't like, oh, yes, you know, absolutely, or it's like, oh my god, that's perfect, she's gonna kill this. It was just more one of those cases where it's like, alright. It's like I didn't really have much of a reaction to it. It's just like, yeah, I'm sure she'll be fine. And that'll be the end of that. Yeah, and there were some moments that I wasn't, like, sure about, because for the most part she does work, but then there are those cases where every now and then she'll have a line reading that just seems like really oddly emotionless. But I kind of just tried to not pay attention to that because it was like I couldn't tell if they were sort of intentionally making something a bit, both figuratively and literally, alien about her with the way she said some of those lines. So that would make sense if that's what they were going for. And she does have, a lot of those charming moments. One in particular at the beginning when she's fighting them and she, like, one of them growls in her face and she, like, mockingly growls back at it. It just little things like that do work also. The way she uses a computer I found really amusing. So, so all that is perfectly fine. So, and she can find that intensity when she wants to. I can understand a criticism if she maybe doesn't come off like, I guess, threatening enough. But yeah, I think she works for the most part. I'm fine with it. So as far as the action goes, I do think there was maybe something lacking there a little bit. It's not as well, it's not as frequent as the others, but in some cases that's probably a bit of a blessing, because there's been so much action in the past few movies, especially since, Infinity War had to be mostly that, and the wars at the end of these movies are getting bigger and bigger. Like, it was refreshing that the climax of this movie wasn't, like, two big groups of people just colliding, like we've been saying. So once again, it was more akin to like a Guardians climax, more or less. But honestly, even more downplayed than that. I know it's weird to say downplayed talking about a Guardians climax, but you get what I mean. Compared to like the big armies and shit, it feels smaller for the better. But a lot of it seems to come from less the action and more the concept of them being able to shapeshift into other people. It kind of gave this vibe of, honestly, the vibe I got first was the Denzel movie Fallen. The way they could just kind of go from person to person, but it also kind of felt a lot like, especially with Fury and Coulson, as little as we got of that partnership, unfortunately, it still kind of felt like the relationship between two, I guess, cops, you would say. It felt more like an 80s movie than a 90s movie, but either way, it still works, and it's still something I kind of wish we'd gotten more of. And in that particular context, especially with the scrolls in here, it kind of reminded me of the movie The Hidden. I think it was like 86 or something. It has Kyle MacLachlan in it, and it's great. It kind of reminded me of that movie a little bit also, which is certainly an asset. So, and we've also got Ben Mendelsohn in here under some really impressive... with these movies now, you can't really tell what CGI and what's makeup. I'm going to assume this is makeup that Ben Mendelsohn's underneath. Which, well, either way, it's extremely impressive, because I would consider myself, like, really, really, really familiar with Ben Mendelsohn. But it was kind of a long time before I knew it was him. Like, I knew it was him before we saw him in his Ben Mendelsohn form. But the only giveaway is his voice. Like, his voice is unmistakable, obviously. Where I kept thinking, like, I know that voice. And then when it finally occurred to me and I realized it was him, it was like, I can't see him in there. Like, we see this character through the whole movie, and it's like, even though I know that's him, I cannot see his face in there. And that's really impressive. So, and he has a really great character as well. So, and just really the interactions with the characters in general, like, especially between, Captain Marvel herself and Fury, but also, the interactions with the Mendelsohn character and Fury's interactions with Goose and all that. That's another thing where it's kind of obviously Guardians related. I can't tell if I want to, give it a compliment or a criticism in regards to, there is a scene involving Goose that's like a big sort of payoff scene. Like a scene that you don't know you've been waiting for until it happens, but it's almost exactly like a scene with Groot in the first Guardians movie. And I don't know whether to say, like, yeah, because it almost feels like a running gag, but at the same time it also feels like it could just be derivative of itself. So it's kind of hard to tell where that lies, but still it is kind of satisfying when that scene happens anyway, so it's fine. And obviously there's a couple of Stanley related things in there that fans are obviously going to love. I'd heard that there was going to be like a tribute to him at the beginning, but I figured that would be like a sort of a pre-movie thing that just lasted for a minute or so. Didn't realize it was going to be the logo thing, which is actually a really kind of nice touch where where they didn't have to say anything, and just like it was right there. And then the actual cameo in the movie is it's like I honestly can't wait to hear how Kevin Smith feels about it, and it's like anybody that's like a longtime Kevin Smith fan will be like so incredibly satisfied by that cameo. And obviously with the way the timeline matches up perfectly, it's like, of course. Like, I never would have guessed that would be the movie related to that cameo, given the timeline, but I'm really glad it's in there anyway. So, yeah, I would say this is probably, you know, one of the weaker entries in this universe, and that sounds bad because there's so many movies in it. But no, the bar has been pretty consistent up to this point, so so yeah. But I think it mainly falls on the. I am curious to see it again because I do usually, actually almost always, see all the Marvel movies at least twice in theaters because I see it immediately to do this, and then usually when they've been out for like 2 or 3 weeks or so, I go with like all my family and all them. So I'm curious how the kind of first 20 minutes or so there where I was totally lost is on a second time around now that I know what's happening. And if that'll maybe help straighten out how I feel about the movie as a whole. But right now it was kind of like, it feels like a little underwhelming, but at the same time, I don't know if you can ever live up to this is the movie that, I mean, technically, I mean, in The Lost, this is the movie that follows Infinity War, but I mean, knowing her connection to Infinity War, we already know going in, and how big of a deal this character is going to inevitably be. It's a lot on this movie's shoulders for just kind of being the sort of more or less typical movie that it is. But it's fine. So, yeah, but like I said, I'm really interested to see how exactly I feel on the second viewing, which is kind of a cop-out, but that's really all I can say for now, right up front. So, yeah, it's fine. The second movie is going to be Greta, which is a movie that before it came out, I had learned about maybe like 3 days prior, and I was absolutely shocked when I looked at movie times and saw that our theater had it. Because, I mean, stuff put out by Focus tends to go either way. Either we'll get it or it won't come anywhere close to here. And it just seemed so incredibly random, and the only thing I saw was it was a banner on IMDb, I think, and it was all the critical comments talking about how fucking insane it was. But I had no idea what the plot was or anything. Literally the only thing that I knew was Isabelle Huppert and Chloe Moretz were the stars of it. That's it. I didn't even learn till like 2 days later, like the day before I saw the movie, that Neil Jordan did it. Who I don't know if he's done a movie since then, but I'm pretty sure the last movie I saw of his was Byzantium, the very underwhelming vampire movie with Saoirse Ronan. So, yeah, that was actually really exciting. Because I do like his movies a lot. Obviously, he's famous for The Crying Game and Interview with the Vampire, but he's got all kinds of weird stuff in there. One of his earlier movies is right here, The Butcher Boy, which I honestly cannot recommend enough if you can track this down. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it was one of his earlier movies, but you can tell just the pure insanity that was in his future as a filmmaker following that. So yeah, now as far as talking about this movie, it's probably going to be like this might, depending on what you consider spoilery, this will probably be a bit spoilery because it's one of those cases where once it hits a certain mark, which is a lot earlier than you might be expecting, is just kind of when it all unfolds. So, yeah. And it is one of those movies also where there were only like 3 people in there when I saw it, and I think that's probably for the better. But at the same time, I'm still curious anyway how exactly this plays to big crowds, because I feel like there's going to be 2 different kind of crowds that go into this movie. The people that see it as a comedy and the people that don't. So it's like I almost I don't want to, because it'll give people the wrong impression. But if you're aware of my opinion of this movie, I want I keep wanting to compare it to Nicolas Cage's version of The Wicker Man. In regards to how you view this movie, whether you view it as a comedy or as like this suspense thriller, borderline horror kind of thing. Because it's definitely got like the whole paranoid vibe to it. Like if it wasn't trying to play itself up as like, you know, this weird ass comedy of sorts, a movie it'd probably be really comparable to would be The Gift, the one with Jason Bateman and Joel Edgerton. So, and also kind of that same feel too, where like in The Gift, when you have those moments where Edgerton's character has made you so paranoid that you're just kind of looking in the backgrounds of scenes because you feel like he might be there, just lurking, even if the camera's not drawing attention to him. And you kind of start to feel that way pretty quickly about Hubert's character also. So you could see it in that particular sense, but it also is very cheesy very quickly. It's got lines like Chloe Moretz saying, "My friends say I'm like chewing gum, I tend to stick around." And when she first said that, I was like, well, that's kind of a weird line. Little did I realize this line is going to come back over and over and over and over again. And like I said, it's kind of hard to tell. Like, if I hadn't gotten word going in that it's kind of intentionally campy, I don't know if I would have known what to think. If I would have been totally aware of if it was doing it on purpose or not. The line is really, really thin and really, really blurry. So, and the interesting thing about it too, and I think this is where it comes in, is how quick it is to jump into absurdity, because because obviously it's going to start and seem normal, but then eventually get to kind of a point of insanity, and the Isabelle Huppert character is going to get more and more, you know, out of control. But no, there's really nothing gradual about it. It's like, it's normal, 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 and then maybe half an hour in, if that, just immediately. There's no, like, just instantly crazy. There is no sort of gradual build up to anything. It's just, Chloe Moretz is acting normal in her house, she's looking around, she opens a cabinet, and from then on, we know that shit's all out of whack. So, yeah, and there's sort of like this, like, unsettling score that kind of immediately tells us, like even if, like, there's no subtlety here whatsoever, where it's like, this could mean, you know, potentially a number of things, but the score is very quick in telling us that something is really, really, really wrong really fast. And there is actually something sort of genuinely unsettling about the score. But like, it is doing its job. It's just doing its job very, very quickly. And like I said, at that point, it just immediately jumps into absurdity and never comes back. So we get stuff like the whole moment where, and the 2 women in front of me seem to get it real fast. Because the whole thing is where I was talking about the paranoia at the beginning, where it feels kind of genuinely uneasy. But then just immediately after the reveal start happening, every time Isabelle just sort of materializes from out of nowhere, they would laugh, like, immediately, because it's just so incredibly absurd every time it happens, where she seems to be, because, like I said, I could actually see this being a serious movie, in the way that, like, it sort of feels like, you know, like it's doing it from the point of view of a nightmare, where it's like, there's nothing at all threatening about Greta. She's just, like, she doesn't seem to have any weapons on her. Just the threat is her mere existence and presence. And so it's like, well, Chloe Moretz, you know, I think you can take her. So what's exactly the problem here? And it even gets to a point where like we have scenes like the text chase, where Greta is sending her pictures of Megan Monroe, her roommate, while she's sort of, out at a bar or whatever, and whenever she leaves or she's walking home or whatever, and it's like every time she even moves, Greta sends Chloe Moretz a text to show that she's following her. And it's like, and even Chloe Moretz's delivery of this almost feels real, like in her frustration, where she could say a number of, these particular movie lines, and it's like, oh, get out of there, she's crazy. But I believe Chloe Moretz's first line in this scenario is, "This is bullshit," which are something really funny about. And just kind of in that general frustration, but still, it's like, okay, yeah, it's weird she's following her and taking pictures of her, but I mean, what is stopping people from just attacking her, I guess? Because that's all she does, is just stand there. And this is when you can tell the comedy's starting to take over, because one of the big sort of turning scenes in this, where we know, Greta's really starting to get unhinged, is Chloe Moretz is at work as a waitress, and she looks out the window, and Greta's just standing in the street, just staring into the restaurant. Like, all the way to, from the afternoon to when the sun goes down and she doesn't move. And it's only really goes into comedy when the cop is brought in and has to explain to her, well, she's in a public place, so we can't really stop her from doing that. So you just kind of got to deal with her standing there and staring at you. And that's all it is. And that's all she does. She doesn't appear to be physically dangerous until like the last 15 minutes of the movie. Other than that, it's just she's there. And she seems to come from out of nowhere. But I was talking about the nightmare approach. Is it's basically like, I guess it kind of, like I said, you can take it as a serious movie if you feel like it's that nightmare scenario where there's something there that's coming for you, but there's nothing, visibly threatening about it, but at the same time there's nothing you can do about it. Where it's like that scenario where like nobody's like, doing anything physical to get Greta away from them. That, like I said, even if she was threatening, it's Isabelle Huppert. What's she gonna do? But yeah, and she's also kind of doing the kind of like, it seems like the Tim Roth and the Hateful Eight thing, where she appears to be French, but she also might not be. So it's almost like her accent almost seems exaggerated, even though it's still technically her accent. So there's a lot in here that it's just, and I still am not quite sure how much I like it. But yeah, there is definitely something in here, especially if this is your kind of thing. I mean, there's still something of artistic value here also, because like there's a scene at the beginning, towards the beginning, when they're in a movie theater. And apparently 3D was still a trend when this movie was made. Because they have the glasses and it's like reflecting off of them. And it's like, I started to sort of nitpick it and say, don't you hate this movie cliche where people just sort of talk at normal volume and have full conversations in a movie theater while the movie's playing? But then just like the way this scene is shot and the way the audio is with the movie being behind them, I just kind of really liked the way it was done, and I kind of stopped thinking about that, even though the scene is, like, more or less irrelevant. It just gives us exposition about the fact that Chloe Moretz's mom is dead, and her dad, Colin Farrell, is just kind of comes in and out of the movie, and there's a somewhat relationship there, but overall it's all just laying out the blueprints for what the movie's points are later, and like once they sort of lay those character backgrounds out in like the first 20 minutes, you can pretty much get like the motives of everybody for the rest of the movie. But I don't think that's what the movie's all that interested in. I think just, like I said, just the total suddenness and the instant escalation of the shit that happens here, where it's like, it feels like I said, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of threat with Greta, but it still feels like it's like totally escalating anyway. I don't know. But like I said, there is still some stuff here. Like there's a really sort of twisted and sort of unexpected fake out towards the middle as we're getting to the end. Um, it was really interesting, kind of really kind of fucks with the audience a little bit in a nice way, but yeah. Um, so so yeah, and it's we're one of those things though where it's just like you keep asking questions like how does Greta do the things that she does? How does she get to the places that she does and all that? Like I said, you can either take that as it's almost like being in Chloe Moretz's nightmare sort of scenario, or you could just see it as this really over the top, absurd thing. It's I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I saw it on Tuesday. I saw it almost a week ago, and I'm still not quite sure how much I like it, or I don't know. I don't dislike it at all. I think it would be really hard to dislike a Neil Jordan movie. It's like it's easy to be underwhelmed by one, but sometimes he just goes completely off the rails like this. And yes, of course, Stephen Ray eventually finds his way into it because it's a Neil Jordan movie. And it does get pretty... It gets really, really routine by the time Stephen Ray comes into it, given who that character is and how very, very late he comes in. Like, he's in the opening credits, but I had assumed that the movie was about to end before he even showed up. That's how late he comes in. um, yeah. So, like, if this is your thing, just this really crazy shit that just doesn't give a fuck, you'll probably really, really be into this, but if somebody goes into this unsuspecting thinking it's going to be, like, a genuine, straightforward thriller, they'll get a little bit of that, but maybe not exactly what they're expecting. I could totally see a person like going into this and taking it at face value as just a regular thriller, and actually getting something out of it, a little something out of it. They might be a little, confused as far as its tone, but I could see somebody like totally buying this as just a regular thriller until somebody tells them um, what exactly what appears to be the motives of the filmmakers. But yeah, so yeah, that's what that is. So speaking of just being tonally fucked up, this one is not so intentional. A Madea family funeral, which Tyler Perry has been building up to be the last Madea movie. And this is... I kind of thought... There were two things I thought this was going to be, potentially. There was, kind of talk there about him saying it's a Madea family funeral, and he's really, really building up it's the last Madea movie, so it's like, is it Madea's funeral? It's like, is he actually going to kill off Madea? Because that would be incredibly... admirable that he would actually do that. But no, obviously the movie's not going to be that dark. Because I was also thinking, like, is it, his take on death at a funeral? Which I think is probably what he was trying to do, but, obviously being closer to the more, frantic Chris Rock version than the British version. Either way, I like both versions of Death at a Funeral, personally, but this movie is neither one by any means. Once again, he just doesn't go that dark. Like, he'll go dark with his dramatic subplots, but he doesn't go, like, killing off Madea dark ever. It's almost like he was never going to do that, because he had the chance to go, like, in really interesting directions and really dark directions when he made the Boo movies. Because remember, it was like... the craziness it seemed to be at the start when the marketing came out, and the Boo movies looked like they actually had, like, horror elements in it, like crazy-ass clowns and zombies and shit. It's like, that would have been so incredibly off the rails, I probably would have loved it. But it was that whole, it's just a big elaborate prank from a fraternity bullshit, and it's like, no. If he can't even commit to making a Madea horror movie, he's not gonna kill Madea off, sadly. And apparently he made this, like, 2 years ago. Like, it was supposed to be... Like, it had already been made by the time Boo 2 came out. But he didn't want to release his Madea movies, like, in quick succession. So he put out Acrimony and Nobody's Fool, and then threw Madea Family Funeral out 2 years later. No particular dramatic reason. Just he didn't want the Madea movies close together, and I guess he wanted a more send-off thing or something, despite the fact that this is in no way a send-off movie whatsoever. It plays off just as the other ones do. The ending is a stupid Mike Tyson punchline, similar to the Dwayne Johnson punchline, and, what was that, Why Did I Get Married Too, I think? So, I don't know why the hell I know that, but here we are. They did change something since. Because we talked about how I'm pretty sure he just writes these movies down on, you know, napkins you get at, like, a bar or something. But the thing here is, apparently this took less than a week to shoot. Like, the whole thing. Which is not surprising. And they've since changed it. I'm really disappointed they changed it, but I knew they would. For a little bit there, in the IMDb trivia, it said the movie was shot in 1 week, ... and it's painfully obvious, is actually what it said in the IMDb trivia, but it's since been edited and just says it was shot in under a week. But it is painfully obvious, as it is for pretty much all of his other movies. But the thing about this is, with him, you know, saying this is it for the Madea character, regardless of how much money he's going to make. It's not like Tyler Perry's in need of money. But the thing here is, he has introduced a new character, Uncle Heathrow, who is a war veteran who may not actually be that. But the thing here is, I may have misunderstood him, but I was thinking I heard him say this would be his new returning character, and that we'd still, like, basically implying that we'd still have, like, a series. It would just be this. Or this could just be, you know, a character that's in this, and he's just going to do more Nobody's Fool or Acrimony type movies. I don't know, but this character that's supposedly going to take the throne of Madea is... You can tell he's in a big old damn hurry, because even despite the seeming significance this character has in regards to being new to this series, he's introduced and already doing his thing before the opening credits are even over. So he's in a really... And it's weird, I say he's in a real big damn hurry, because this movie is still, like, you know... I would say borderline 2 hours, but it's like 1:45, which is way too long. And it's... Once again, there are just endless scenes of characters sitting around and talking. Now, my memory of the Madea movies from like 10 years ago are getting more and more vague, thank God, as time goes on. But it's like the main thing I do remember is the really drastic tonal shifts. Particularly Madea Goes to Jail really threw me off. Because, like, Diary of a Mad Black Woman was one thing, because I didn't really know what to expect when I saw that, because it was, like, the first one, and I had no idea of the play's existence at all. But still, I remember specifically Madea Goes to Jail was like, what in the hell am I even looking at? Because, especially since these movies often get 2 posters, or at least they used to. Like, for, Madea Goes to Jail, there was the one where it's like Madea in the lineup and she's got like the cornrows and the jumpsuit, and it's like, hey, it's all wacky and shit. And then there was a second Madea Goes to Jail poster that looked like really artsy and serious, and it was like a purple dove or some shit. And yeah, sure enough, there's like a whole serious sort of like wife-beating subplot in that movie or something. That seems to almost have nothing to do with the Madea shit that's going on. And it's like, those tonal shifts have always been in his movies, but it's like, they're just getting more and more blatant as they go on, because after a while in these Madea movies, the really dramatic subplots are the only time we get any sort of story, or plot, I guess you could say. I think plot's a better word in this case. Because the Madea scenes now are literally just him trying to do the Eddie Murphy thing, where he's playing this character, he's playing this character, he's playing that character. It's Madea, I think Joe is the dude's name, and now he's doing Uncle Heathrow, and then he's the character that looks like him. And he's just bouncing around and bouncing around, and a lot of that's just what these scenes are. And then there's the woman with the really annoying voice, and it's like I feel like that voice gets more annoying with every movie, and the funnier his fans will probably find it. And it's like before they even show up, before Madea and Joe are even in the movie, one of the characters is like, you know, hey, I like them. They're funny, you know. And it's like, well, way to congratulate yourself, Tyler Perry. It's like, we know who wrote this. Which is even weird to even say that, because Tyler Perry does seem like so, you know, humble in real life. Like, he's so incredibly likable in real life, it seems, judging by his appearances. But, I don't know what the hell goes through his mind when he makes this shit. And it just goes on and on and on, and it's like the scenes in, like, I didn't even bother, at least I don't think, and I don't think I even bothered to review Boo 2, because it really just felt like the first movie, and there was literally nothing to say, because it had already been said. The characters just sit around in the living room and talk for like 20 damn minutes, and it's... And I don't get this. And then we get to some, you know, jokes that go on that are just as dragged out as these scenes. Like the scene when the cop pulls them over. And it's like, and this scene goes on and on and on and on forever. And of course, the joke is, it's like all the characters played by Tyler Perry in one car. And they're all, except for Tyler Perry, the one that looks like Tyler Perry, coming to the conclusion that, oh, they're probably going to get shot because the cop's white. And it's like, I can't tell if this joke is in poor taste, because it's not funny. Because my thought process, I kind of had to debate with myself, and I was like, this isn't funny at all, because it's just not funny. But then it's like, is it also in poor taste? But then it's like, would I have felt like it was in poor taste if it was actually funny? And then I was like, why am I having so much self-debate watching a damn Madea movie? Fuck it. I'm not gonna think this hard about it. And that scene really goes nowhere, as you can probably guess, despite the fact of how dragged out it is. And then obviously eventually we're gonna get to all the drama, where we've got the two brothers who are, there's the girl that's engaged to one of them, but they're both banging her, and it's like, of course the sleazy character has my name. That was fun to hear over and over again. And then it's basically just characters saying, I lost my daddy, or my daddy's dead, on a loop, over and over and over and over again. That's like 75% of this movie's dialogue, is I lost my daddy, or my daddy's dead. And that's the drama. There it is. So, we're cutting back and forth drastically between this and Madea and Joe and all those, Uncle Heathrow and all of them doing their bullshit in the living room. And then it takes a long time. It's like almost an hour in before we even see a casket. And then the funeral's like the last 15 minutes. And it's exactly what you'd expect it to be. And here's the thing about this, is by the time the movie has just been people sitting around talking, then people standing around talking, then people sitting around talking again, you start to get a sense of why this is the last Madea movie. And it's like, I don't think he's ever going to admit it, because his fans are so devoted to these movies, and he is so devoted to keeping his fans happy. I don't think he's ever going to admit that I am pretty sure Tyler Perry wanted to end here. He said, like, I don't want to be Medea's age still playing Madea. Haha. No, I think he's legitimately tired of this shit. And that's why they just get lazier and lazier and lazier. Because it's like, what can he do? I don't even think he writes them anymore. He may write the dramatic subplots, but when it comes like Madea and Joe and Uncle Heathrow and them, I'm pretty sure he just sits, he gets in one costume, and then he just says whatever the hell comes to his mind. And then he gets in the next costume, does the same thing. The conversations don't even have to necessarily be connected. He just sort of does that, and then they edit it together later, and then that's what takes up a lot of the movie. Now, why it needs to be this long, I don't know. And that's especially ironic when you get to the ending. Because the whole point, the whole joke, is that the funeral goes on and on and on and on and on to the point that the characters themselves are getting annoyed. We see the guy, like, the only laugh in the movie is the guy outside that's supposed to be driving the hearse is just like pacing around, looking at his watch, wondering where the hell everybody is because the funeral won't fucking end. And it's even to the point where we see the Tyler Perry character, the one that's just him, that looks like him, like falling asleep at this funeral because it's just going on and on and on. And it's like, he knows how we feel, doesn't he? He's doing this shit on purpose. He knows what he's doing. His fans don't seem to pick up on it, but it feels like he's blatantly saying, I know how you feel about my movies, and I know this is what we've come to, and that's why I'm ending them. So I'm just going to get some final digs in here and say, I'm more or less fucking trolling you at this point with this bullshit. But, you know, his fans love this, and I don't understand. I don't get this. I don't know. And obviously, when it comes to the family we're talking about, the family in the title, I don't know who the hell's what. Like, I'm really surprised I could remember there were 2 brothers. Because everybody else, it's like, there's so many characters, and it's like, this person, I think, connects to this person in this way, but I'm not really sure. Like, I'm pretty sure they were brothers. Going into this, I was, like, trying to remember, it's like, they were, right? But, like, yeah, that's what the big dramatic thing is. But yeah, so it's like how one character connects to another is often, like, it just doesn't matter so much. It's like, he just doesn't even bother to make this clear. It's like we see all these people and it's like, well, the movie's called A Madea Family Funeral. I assume they're all related. Okay. So, yeah, apparently no family friends or anything like that. So, alright. So that's, yeah. So that's the conclusion I'm going to come to. I feel like this movie is just one giant fucking troll from Tyler Perry who has just gotten tired of doing this. Which is why Madea is over, and why she's not even getting a send-off. He cares that little about it. And honestly, who can blame him? And I do get it, you know, because it's like, the fact that he, you know, wasn't even gonna make, like, Boo wasn't even his idea. It was the whole thing where Chris Rock made that joke in Top 5, and Lionsgate told him to do it, basically. And he's like, well, I mean, if you're gonna pay me, I guess I can write a little something down, you know, why not? Because he's also, I mean, not only is he rich as fuck, but he, to my understanding, is pretty charitable too. So it's like, you know, all the power to him if he's going to get more money. But I don't know. But at least it's over now. It's all over, and the weight can be lifted off of us. And I would like, and I know people are going to be cynical and say, yeah, right, like this is the last one, given how much money this will probably make. But I'm gonna trust him. I mean, this is the guy that, you know, was smart enough to do Gone Girl, and, you know, take on, you know, Vice, even as indifferent as I am to Vice, you know, to be able to decide to take on projects like that. It's like, it's clear he knows where quality is, and it's maybe not the stuff he's making, but he knows where to find it. So, you know, good luck to him with whatever it is he plans on doing next. Like I said, if he's going to do more crazy shit like Acrimony, like, I didn't like Acrimony, but I admired its craziness. You know, I actually didn't bother to see Nobody's Fool. I'll probably see it when it's, like, at the library or something, when I don't have to pay for it. But, but you know, we'll see what he does. But we'll look more forward to his non-produced, written, and directed by career, you know, acting career. Like, his acting career and the stuff that he's not making, we can look forward to, at least. But I am a little curious to see the kind of stuff he goes into now, without having to, you know, stick to this Madea franchise. So, that's, I guess, it for this week. I have no idea what the hell is in the next week or two, but we'll figure that out as we go. I know the next video, there's going to be a couple of verses here, probably, and I'm doing that catch-up video with a bunch of stuff on it from this year, so yeah. So until all that stuff, I think that's it for this.